You've seen the retirement budget videos. $1,500 a month, $2,800, $5,000, $9,000. They all show you exactly what a single retiree can afford. And if you've been watching them as a couple, you've probably been doing some mental math. Doubling this number, adjusting that one. The problem is, that math doesn't work the way you think. The average retired couple brings in $3,208 a month from Social Security. That sounds like a solid foundation, but here's what those videos don't tell you. Healthcare for two can run $900 or more per month, sometimes significantly more. Housing doesn't double the way you'd expect. It scales closer to 1.5 times a single person's cost. Meanwhile, personal expenses, prescriptions, dental, vision, stack up for each person individually. The net result is that a couple living on $5,000 a month often has less real spending room than a single person living on $3,000. Not more, less. That gap is what this video is about, not the big round budget numbers. The difference between what looks like plenty on paper and what actually feels tight once the fixed costs are lined up. In this video, I'm going to walk through each of those 4 budget levels: $1,500, $2,800, $5,000, and $9,000. For a couple, I'll show you exactly where the single retiree math breaks down, what each level can realistically cover for 2 people, and the one budget trap that catches even well-prepared couples off guard. If you're planning retirement as a couple, subscribe now. Most of the advice out there was written for a single person. I'm going to show you what it actually looks like for 2. Let's start with the trap. Most retirement budget examples are built for a single person. When couples try to apply them, they double the numbers, and they end up off by $500 to $1,000 a month in real spending power. That's not a rounding error. That's a vacation, or 3 months of groceries, or one unexpected medical bill. Here's how it happens. The average retired couple receives $3,208 a month from Social Security, according to the SSA. That's a reasonable baseline. But healthcare alone can take $900 of it, and that number doesn't include out-of-pocket costs, dental or vision. So before you've paid for housing, food, or transportation, close to 1/3 of your Social Security income is already spoken for. Think about what that means in practice. A couple drawing $3,208 is already seeing $900 headed toward healthcare premiums and about to commit $1,800 to housing. That's $2,700 out the door, before a single grocery trip, before a utility bill, before gas. The number that looked like a solid foundation starts to feel a lot smaller once the fixed costs line up in front of it. But here's the reversal. The costs that are cheaper when shared, housing, utilities, don't save you nearly as much as you'd expect. If a single retiree spends $1,200 a month on housing, a couple doesn't spend $2,400. They spend closer to $1,800. Housing scales at about 1.5 times. That sounds like savings, and it is, compared to doubling. But on the other side of the ledger, healthcare doesn't share the same economy. It stacks nearly in full for each person. 2 Medicare premiums, 2 Part D premiums, 2 people aging, 2 sets of prescriptions. Fidelity estimates that a 65-year-old individual should plan for roughly $172,500 in total health care costs over a retirement lifetime. For a couple, that number roughly doubles to $345,000. The mechanics break down like this: shared expenses, housing, utilities, food, scale at roughly 1.5 times what a single person pays. Individual expenses, health insurance, Medicare premiums, personal spending, scale at closer to 8 to 2.2 times. The combined effect is that a couple's budget is actually tighter per person, not looser. A $5,000 monthly household budget does not give each partner $2,500 of spending room. After fixed costs, each person might have $750 left for everything else. That's the gap the single budget videos never mention. I've watched this realization hit people more times than I can count. The moment they run the actual couple's math for the first time and discover the single retiree budget they've been using as a reference point is off by $800 or more per month. That's not a planning failure, it's the wrong blueprint. Now let's look at what $1,500 a month actually buys for two people, and why it's not just double the struggle. $1,500 a month for two people puts a couple below the federal poverty line. In 2026, the federal poverty guideline for a two-person household is $20,440 a year. That's $1,703 a month. So at $1,500 total, this budget is technically below that threshold. That's not a judgment about lifestyle choices. It's just the starting point for understanding what this number actually means for two people. To make $1,500 work for a couple, several things have to line up at once. Housing has to be paid off. A mortgage or apartment rent would consume the entire budget by itself. Health care has to be subsidized. Without assistance, a bronze ACA plan for a couple in their early 60s can run $1,200 to $1,500 a month in premiums alone, before copays, deductibles, or prescriptions. And you would likely need supplemental assistance programs, particularly Medicaid if your state has expanded eligibility to 138% of the federal poverty level, and SNAP for groceries. Consider Tom and Linda, both 62, living in a paid-off mobile home in rural Mississippi. Their combined income is $1,500, a small pension and some part-time earnings. They qualify for Medicaid under their state's expansion and for SNAP. Their budget technically works. But look at what has to be true simultaneously. No housing debt, a state with expanded Medicaid, and a cost of living low enough that food and utilities don't tip the balance. Take away any one of those conditions, and this budget doesn't hold. That's the central problem with $1,500 for a couple. It's not just tight, it's brittle. One health crisis, one loss of subsidy eligibility, one emergency car repair, and there's nothing to absorb it. There's no buffer, no flexibility, no margin. If you're living on $1,500 as a couple right now and it's working, it's likely because you've engineered a specific set of circumstances that keep it stable. That's not failure, but it does mean you're one event away from a real problem. $2,800 a month is where the floor starts to rise. Let me show you what that actually looks like. $2,800 a month is where things start to feel more like a real retirement budget. Not comfortable, but functional. For many couples, this is close to what they're actually working with. The average Social Security benefit for a retired couple is $3,208 a month. After Medicare Part B premiums, $174.70 per person per month in 2026, and a typical Part D drug plan at around $50 per person, you're looking at roughly $450 a month in healthcare premiums before anything else is covered. That leaves about $2,758 from Social Security alone. Add a small pension, part-time work, or a modest withdrawal from savings, and you get to around $2,800 in usable monthly income. So this budget isn't hypothetical for most couples. It's realistic. But here's where the pressure shows. If your housing is paid off, you're managing property taxes and insurance, which might run $400 a month. Add utilities at around $200, food for two at around $600, and basic transportation at $300. That's $1,500 in necessities before you've spent a dollar on anything else. Add the $450 in healthcare premiums, and you're at $1,950. What's left is about $850 for personal spending, car repairs, medical costs not covered by insurance, and anything unexpected. That $850 doesn't stretch as far as it sounds. Two people need food beyond the $600 estimate, personal care items, phone bills, and occasional small household repairs. A normal month can consume that $850 without any single item feeling extravagant. And what $2,800 can't absorb is the irregular expense. New tires, a copay that runs over what Medicare covers, a plane ticket to see family. I've been close to this situation myself. Early in retirement, my wife and I were living on about $2,800 a month for 2 years. It's doable, but every month you know where every dollar is going. You can't absorb a surprise, a $1,500 car repair, a dental procedure, a higher utility bill in a cold winter. Those things don't just feel inconvenient. They feel like a threat. The budget works when everything runs on schedule. What it can't handle is variance. And in retirement, variance is guaranteed. $5,000 a month feels like the point where that pressure lifts. But the numbers tell a different story. $5,000 a month feels like the threshold where retirement becomes comfortable. Most couples I've talked to, and most retirement calculators, treat this as the point where money stops being a source of daily anxiety. And in some ways, it is. But run the actual fixed costs, and you'll find the margin is smaller than you expected. Start with housing. A couple renting in a mid-cost area or carrying property taxes and insurance on a home might spend $1,800 a month. That's roughly 1.5 times what a single retiree in the same area would pay, not double. Healthcare is where the scaling shifts. Medicare premiums, a Medigap plan, and Part D coverage for 2 people can run $900 a month or more. Transportation, 1 or 2 cars, insurance, maintenance, comes to around $500. Utilities at $300. That's $3,500 in fixed costs before food, clothing, or any discretionary spending. $5,000 minus $3,500 leaves $1,500 for everything else. For 2 people, that's $750 each for groceries, clothes, entertainment, dining out, gifts, travel, and any medical costs not covered by insurance. I used to think $5,000 a month for a couple was plenty. Then I ran the actual numbers and realized I was off by about $1,000 a month in hidden costs. Things I'd filed as flexible spending, but which turned out to be just as fixed as a monthly bill once we actually retired. That's the catch at $5,000. It's not a bad budget. It covers the basics reliably, and it leaves some room for a modest lifestyle. But it is not the same thing as financial freedom. A single unexpected expense, a new roof, a medical procedure, a car replacement, can wipe out several months of discretionary spending at once. There is a version of $5,000 that works better than the base math suggests, and that's when one partner is still doing some part-time work. Even $500 or $800 a month from consulting or seasonal hours changes the texture of this budget completely. It creates a buffer for the irregular costs without requiring you to draw down savings faster. For couples who can manage it, that partial transition often feels more sustainable than moving to a fully fixed income from day one. The gap between $5,000 a month and real breathing room is about $500 to $1,000 per month for most couples, which is why $9,000 sounds like the answer. But $9,000 has its own surprises, and some of them come directly from the IRS and Medicare. $9,000 a month for a couple is $108,000 a year. That's not a number most people would describe as tight, and it isn't, but it's also not as large as it looks once you account for what's coming out before you spend $1 on your actual life. Start with federal income tax. At $108,000 a year, assuming the standard deduction for a couple filing jointly and some taxation of Social Security income, you're looking at roughly $8,000 in federal taxes. Add state taxes. In California, that could be another $5,000. And you're already at $13,000 in income taxes before Medicare surcharges. Then there's IRMAA. For a couple with modified adjusted gross income between $106,000 and $133,000, Medicare Part B carries an extra surcharge of $69.90 per person per month, and Part D adds $12.90 per person. That's an additional $1,987 a year in Medicare surcharges, just for being over the income threshold. Add regular Medicare premiums, and your total health care costs for two approach $900 a month. Property taxes on a $500,000 home run, about $6,000 a year. Home maintenance, at 1% of value annually, adds another $5,000. Combined with income taxes, IRMAA surcharges, and property costs, you're looking at roughly $21,500 a year, about $1,792 a month, before writing a single check for groceries. That leaves around $7,200 a month in real spending power. Then subtract health care premiums, and you're at about $6,300. Still comfortable, still a good retirement, but not the unlimited lifestyle the headline number suggests when you first hear it. And there's one more risk at this level that doesn't exist at $2,800 or $5,000. Sequence of returns risk. If $3,000 of your monthly income is coming from portfolio withdrawals, and the market drops 20% in the first 3 years of retirement, you're selling assets at a loss to fund your lifestyle. Couples who are unprepared for this often lock in those losses. Couples who are prepared have a cash buffer, 6 to 12 months of expenses in liquid savings, so they can reduce discretionary spending temporarily without touching the portfolio during a downturn. $9,000 is a strong retirement income, but it comes with its own tax exposure, its own surcharges, and its own risks. The difference between $9,000 feeling abundant and feeling pressured often comes down to how well you've prepared for those surprises. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough in retirement budget discussions. You can have the right income. You can hit $5,000 or $9,000 a month, and you still might not be able to spend it. If you've spent 30 or 40 years building savings, watching the account balance grow, cutting unnecessary expenses, putting money away instead of spending it, then retirement asks you to reverse that instinct. And for a lot of people, especially those in their late 50s and 60s, That reversal doesn't happen automatically. I'll be honest. My wife and I still struggle with this. We have the money set aside, but I still check the portfolio balance more than I should. Every withdrawal feels like giving something up, rather than using what we saved it for. That's not a financial problem. It's a psychological one. If you recognize that feeling, you're not broken. You're wired for accumulation. That wiring kept you disciplined through 30 years of saving. But in retirement, it can work against you, keeping you below your actual budget when you've earned the right to use it. One reframe that helps. Think of your savings not as a pile of cash you're depleting, but as a lifetime income generator. If you have $1 million at 65 and follow a 4% annual withdrawal rate, that's $40,000 a year, $3,333 a month, that you can spend without running out over a 30-year retirement. That's not depleting your savings. That's the money doing its job. Once you give yourself permission to use it, the budget numbers become tools instead of cages. We walked through 4 budget levels for couples: $1,500, $2,800, $5,000, and $9,000. At every level, the same pattern appears. Couples who use single-retiree math as their guide end up either underestimating their costs or overestimating their real spending power. The core takeaway is this: shared expenses, housing, utilities, scale at about 1.5 times a single person's costs. Individual expenses, healthcare, Medicare premiums, prescriptions, scale at nearly double. The combination means a couple's per-person budget is tighter than it looks. And the psychological shift from saving to spending adds another layer that no budget spreadsheet can fully prepare you for. If you're a couple planning retirement together, subscribe now. I'm building a library of real-world retirement math here, not generic advice written for a hypothetical single retiree. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss the next video. And one last thought before you go. Retirement isn't about hitting a magic income number. It's about understanding the trade-offs, what each dollar is actually buying, what the fixed costs really are, and what you're willing to adjust when the numbers don't line up exactly. You've got this. I'll see you in the next video.